Hi, I'm Gracie X, and I wanted to do a video on being a polyamorous parent and parenting tweens. 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. I was inspired to do this video because I wrote an article called How I Raise Teenagers Who Tell Me Everything Even When It's Hard. And this article was wildly popular. You can find it on my website, graciex.com, GRACIEX.com. This article got 65,000 shares on Mind Body Green, and I was blown away by it. And what it said to me is, wow, people really want to know what is going on with their teenagers. So I did this follow-up article on, what's the name of this article? How I talk to my 10-year-old son about sex and why that's important. And that article got 500 shares. Wow. Okay, so what that told me, and this is why I'm doing this video, as a polyamorous parent, sex is something that I talk about with my kids. I also wrote an article when my daughter was 10 years old. She found a vibrator in my sex toy drawer, and she took it, and she came to me about 10 days later, and I said, good for you that you're masturbating. This is going to be great information for your future lovers and spouse. And my people were kind of blown away by that I was talking to my kid about masturbation and sexuality. But this is, if you can't talk to your tween about that at that age, you're probably going to lose that very deep connection to them when they're teenagers. And I think a lot in my community of polyamorous people, most people are comfortable talking about sex, and they have a very sex positive attitude. And the things and so consequently with their children, they're able to talk about sex and talk about hopefully emotional issues. A lot of polyamorous people that I know really study up on stuff like how to communicate well, they take classes, and this makes talking to your tween all that much easier. And the things that I wrote about in the article are principles that I really live in my polyamorous world. One of the things that I talked about in talking to tweens was not to have an ownership mentality around their body or their sexuality. And that's a principle that's pretty prevalent in my polyamorous world, but is not prevalent in the larger world. And one thing that I talked about, I have seen so many parents starting around middle school really being very uptight about what their teenagers start wearing, especially if they're starting to explore their sexuality. I think that is not helpful to start really taking apart and possibly criticizing what your tween is wearing. I would be mindful if I saw that my tween or teenager was really using their sexuality to get attention. I would note that, and I would contemplate whether that was something I needed to help them with. But I think it's normal to start playing around and experimenting, and this whole idea of, this is what I see in my polyamorous world with other polyamorous parents. That's okay. They're expecting for their kid to explore their sexuality. And yes, we want to keep our kids safe and we want to guide them, but lecturing them and coming from an ownership mentality is not going to be helpful ultimately. Other things I wrote in the article are get comfortable with being uncomfortable, talking about sex. Again, a lot of people in my polyamorous community are comfortable talking about sex. The article was really interesting for me to write as a polyamorous mother, because what I realized is, wow, I'm in a different percentile here. There are a lot more people who are uncomfortable talking to their children about sex. Other things I wrote about, use actual words. I think, if you're the parent of a girl child, brush up on the difference between the vulva and the vagina and labia, and you can also research that with your kid online. That's a way to educate your kid. If you want to read the article, it's on my website, graciex.com. Really what this was about for me was how a lot of my principles as a polyamorous person make me a sex-positive parent and make me more available to have difficult conversations, embarrassing conversations, important conversations to have with your kid about a variety of things, sex being one of them. So I thank you for listening. I hope you're having a wonderful day.